Today we are joined by Loah. She is an artist. She is an Irish Sierra Leonean artist, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
And she is making waves in the music industry, and particularly, I would say, you're quite emblematic of the changing styles of Irish music. It's the style of music that, like, I think I'm getting it right here, is art soul. Is that how you would describe it? It's the first time I ever heard art soul was when when I listened to your music, and then I read up on you afterwards, and I thought, I've never heard of that before. And it was probably contextualized by you in my mind. And how would you describe it, I suppose, by way of introduction?
Yeah, I actually made that up because there isn't anything that describes what I do.
Right.
So I felt like it gives people something to latch onto, but it doesn't necessarily fully answer the question. So you have to go and listen to the music. It just means that essentially, I would see it as I'm making soul music, but because of the range of my influences and my actual ethnic and cultural identity being dualistic. So yeah, because of the dualistic nature of both my cultural heritage and ethnic heritage, it kind of lends, it's very difficult for me to kind of choose one pre-established genre to attach myself to, because I don't feel like I come from any one tradition. I certainly wasn't raised in any one particular tradition exclusively. So
were you born in Ireland?
No, but it's kind of random. I wasn't born anywhere where my parents are from. No, I grew up here.
Question.
Yeah, I absolutely consider myself Irish. I've spent most of my childhood here, like almost all my childhood here. Went to school. I spent some time in West Africa as a teen. So I like.
Does that question get tired after a while? do you like when people hear you talking to say like, and like, I suppose you're pinned as an Irish Sierra Leonean first, so like as in Ireland comes first, but like, I mean, is it a question that gets a collective iro at you and you're like, oh jeez, here we go again?
No, well, not in the context of my music, because I do bring Sierra Leonean elements into what I do.
Right.
So, it does, like, it explains it. I mean, that could change in future. I don't know if I'll always... I'm still exploring the sound, so... It kind of annoys me, like, in a more social context when I'm just trying to live my life. And
right.
You're like, so where are you from? Like, basically the question being, why do you look different to the average Irish person?
The ethnicity question.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit abrasive at times, because I sort of feel like I don't constantly want to have to explain myself to strangers. But in music it's different, because that's what I'm doing. I'm explaining myself to strangers, and I accept that. I'm expressing it, and that's fine. So it's more like on it, when I'm having drinks with my mates that it would annoy me.
It's kind of like when you come back after a long absence and you have to tell one person what you did, like, oh, I was away on holidays, and then the next person is, you say the exact same thing, so you should feel like you should have a placard just saying
times your entire life. Multiply that by your whole life.
I can't imagine, but I can only imagine. But just to give people like a brief, people who don't know you, where did your music story start? So was it early childhood? Were you always good at singing? Were you always musical? Did you get pushed into it? Like, for example, I started piano when I was 7 or 8, and didn't really enjoy it, but like, all my brothers and sisters were doing it, so I I did it, and I'm kind of glad I did it now. But what was it like for you?
I was definitely, my mum would have encouraged us all to do lots of music when I was small, we were small. So I did violin. I started that around 3 or 4.
Is your mum musical?
Like, yes and no. I mean, she's not a musician. She doesn't play anything, but she's a musical person, and certainly has a great love for it. So she would have been like super encouraging. I did piano, I did orchestral stuff, I did trad, played like fiddle, was exposed to a lot of stuff growing up. Continued that all during my years in West Africa, apart from the trad, obviously. And then I came home went to college, and I kept up music then, and I got interested in other aspects of it myself. So yeah, like it's always been part of the fabric of my life. I don't really remember a time when I wasn't like learning something musically or engaged in some kind of musical practice, but I wouldn't have automatically thought that was what I was going to do with my life. And certainly, in fact, it wasn't initially. Like, I went to study pharmacy. I didn't, like, I wanted to be a musician, but it just was something that seemed impractical, and it wasn't something I was brought up to be like, you're going to do this at some point.
Yeah,
or,
if you do this, you'll get money. You know, it's like...
Yeah, like, I wasn't brought up in a family that was... Yeah, that wasn't... Yeah, it wasn't... It was about it being a passion as opposed to it being...
it's probably a better starting point.
Definitely, because you get a good relationship with it, or you have it as a passion no matter what. But at the same time, like, there's definitely... I do think that if I was advising someone now, I do think you should get started as early as possible, because it's really tough, and it takes a lot of work, and the more time you have to work at it, the better. So retrospectively, I'm happy with my particular lot because it suits me.
Yeah.
But perhaps if I'd known this was really what I wanted to do earlier, there's definitely advantages to just getting going.
Right, if you have the jump on people from when you're like 5, you know, like that kind of Mozart story style where like they were practicing and they were like, you know, unbelievable, they were doing 8 hours a day when they were 7 or 8. This kind of thing, you think, oh, if I could advise myself, you know, at 6 or at 5 to just start this particular skill, then I would be unbelievable now. And you know what's really interesting about it is like that advice is usually the advice you would give yourself, you know, retrospectively, is the advice that still holds and that you should give yourself right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always the case.
It's always the case, yeah, because it doesn't change anything.
It's
it
the
doesn't change
workout before, you know, the holiday, and you're like, you know, I should like have started working out like 6 months ago, and then you know, it's like,
but you just have to do the thing,
right?
You just do,
like
that
thing,
of course,
that activity.
You just do the same thing that you would do. But certainly, and I mean, Mozart's like a very extreme example, because he also was kind of exceptionally gifted as a child, but it did mean that he was born into a musical family, which helps, you know. But even just in the more the scene that we would see ourselves in today, a lot of the people we would consider to be at the top of the game, or we would idolize, would really just have a good 10 years on everyone, on all their peers as well. Like that usually comes up. So it's sort of like, okay, well, if you started rapping when you were 13, and then you're gonna, by 23 you have a solid handle on it, you know?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Or whatever the equivalent
or
is.
you can get creative with it because you've you know, sort of got all the fundamentals in
you've got your technique out of precisely.
I like that.
But it's all good.
And I suppose in terms of performing, I'm really interested because, you know, you seem very confident, and like I've watched like your videos, your music videos, and like I'm kind of interested in like stage presence, and like you use your hands a lot, like it's very expressive, you know. In terms of when you started performing, when was that? And were you like rigid? Were you like you know, stuck to one spot on the stage or wherever you're performing, and then like start moving around and like building up that?
I would be a very flexible performer in the sense that I didn't do any dance or training or anything like that. And bearing in mind my first performances in my childhood, like public performances, were with an orchestra, which is a very formal, very what would you call it? Static
exactly.
Type of performance scenario. So I didn't perform as a soloist though. When I started singing publicly, I was in college and I was singing funk and soul music and jazz, and the kind of remixes we would do and mixes would be like high energy. So dancing is just a natural part of that. Like it would be, I'm not an awkward person physically, so it would just be natural. If you're singing a James Brown cover, you'll probably find yourself dancing or whatever.
Is that with the Trinity Orchestra, is it?
No, that I have my own band called Jazzberries. I did stuff with the Trinity Orchestra later on. I was in the orchestra as well as a violin player, but band wise I did my own thing. We gigged a good bit over a couple of years, and we ended up doing Electric Picnic and a bunch of stuff like that. But it would have been just the music itself would lend it to being to you moving to movement. So I think, and that kind of applies. And also it's possible for me to do that because I don't play an instrument on stage. So that's just in a very practical way. If you're just standing with the logistics of it are like I'm free to use my arms. And whereas like I think when I've started performing more recently with guitar, and obviously that limits the kind of performance you can give.
The kind of elbow rock to kind of Elvis
exactly
style.
And it depends what kind of music it is as well, you know, so it's all about being appropriate
that
to
does
what
frame doing. You know, your movement in a particular song. But I mean I think even like I'm very much into rap and hip hop, and I love when I see a rapper or I see an artist move. You know, like it's sort of emblematic for me of like people who, you know, are really into what they're expressing. You know, like as in, an example for me would be Childish Gambino. I don't know, Donald Glover. I think his name's Donald Glover.
Donald Glover, yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like in the song Freaks and Geeks. It's just like he's a puppet or something, and there's like a puppeteer like up above him. It's that like movement that it shows like that he's, you know, totally expressing what he's doing, you know, and like it's always a good sign. You know, it means like, you know, I'm not like holding anything back, you know, figuratively or sound, like audio wise. I mean like everyone's different, and I think it really does depend on the type of music you do, because certainly some types of music lend themselves better. Donald Glover is also, he's a multifaceted artist. He's an actor, polymath. So so he's very physical. I mean, does physical theater. He's a very physical person. Like I think, like I sort of feel like some people are naturally maybe less. They're more static as individuals, and for them to dance would be inauthentic. Right, yeah, I know.
So
exactly.
I feel like the authenticity in it all is finding what makes you feel the most true to yourself. And like one of my favorite artists at the moment is Moses Sumney, and he does really slow soundscapey folk. So it's folk music, and it's pretty slow most of the time. He has some videos where he'll move, where they're sort of acting, and there's a bit of kind of unusual modern influence movement,
right?
But it's very particular, and it's very particular to him. And like if he just like sped up one of his tracks and started like, you know, finger gunning, I would find it so bizarre. So you know the way. So I feel like it's on everyone to find the way that you express physically as part of the wider sound. And if you don't express physically at all, then don't, you know.
And like beats per minute, like if it doesn't sync up as well, you're just like, you know, if you saw like Alex Turner from Arctic Monkeys, you know, doing, I don't know, Steve Aoki on stage, you'd be like,
it'd be just weird, unless that was what he felt was good for him, you know. Unless
it matched in some way. Also you mentioned finding your sound, and I was talking to a couple of DJs, like, you know, friends of mine, and they were saying it's really important for like the kind of lifers and like, you know, people who are in it for the long term to find their sound that's particular to them, like, you know, that like I suppose IP address when you come to like, you know, your musical identity. And like you said like you're still in that process, you know, and like what like our Art Soul is part of that, and like what is your process to like getting to the result that is, you know, I know exactly what my sound is, because like you're developing it all the time, like as in you'll look back on right now and think, you know, nearly there, or you know, somewhere.
I think with finding your sound, one thing so far, I've considered myself a baby musically in most ways. I've done a lot of work, but there's thousands more hours to do before I would even consider myself at a level like I think, you know, I have one body of work out, like one. That's nothing really. So what I can say that I've learned is that in terms of finding a sound, a big part of finding a sound, it's only ever maybe going to be for a couple of years that you have, quote unquote, that sound. If you're curious and you're progressive as an artist and you want to move forward, you're probably going to get tired of it. So I think the the best thing you can do is work on something solidly for a while and really commit to it and do the best in terms of the songwriting shape, like the form of the songs, the production around the songs. This is all applying to myself.
Yeah.
And then you really just have to move on from it, release it, and move on. And because if you the delay is what often sometimes creates the confusion, because as you move on in life, if you're passionate about what you do, you're gonna have a rake of new influences in like the next year that are gonna that are currently being made somewhere and you haven't heard them yet, and they're gonna blow your mind in about 6 months time. So you have to just work with what you have right now.
That's like the comedian's mindset, where like it's just like 6 months they cut out. They're like, you know, we were talking about Joe Rogan before we started recording. Like every 6 months he'll like throw out all his stuff and just put that like evolutionary pressure on himself to grow, to learn, and expand, and you know, and it makes you a better artist. Yeah,
you really have to keep it moving. So it's quite intense. So, you know, it ends up being a very intense process, because you're like, okay, I've got all these feelings, thoughts, experiences now. I've got these influences now. And obviously with everyone, there's going to be a thread going through it of what's your kind of imprint. So if blues is what influences you more than anything, there'll probably always be a bluesy tone to what you do. Right. Or if folk is what you are, or if particular traditional type of thing, but how you go about structuring the songs and that may change. That's certainly the way that I would approach what I do. So I would say that my quote unquote problem thus far has been maybe letting one or two prototypes of a sound come through, and then sort of not giving them the full attention they would.
The energy,
and just kind of being like being a bit flooby about it, and then realizing, hang on, that was the beginning of something, and if I just pushed through and written like eight more tunes in exactly that way, that may have been a phase, and then I could, you know what I mean. So now I'm going through a kind of intense writing phase, and just because it's probably all going to end up having a similar motif, because it's all from right now, and I'll do that and work on that, and it could be a year, 2 years of this phase, and then, you know, there'll be releases and singles, and then I'll move on.
What's your process like for writing? Like, if you have a free day, for example, like of a Sunday, you get up. Do you, like, lots of creatives that I know will wake up, particularly with piano players and producers, will wake up and like play for the first half an hour that they're awake, just because, like, I don't know, they might have thought of something, you know, like a shower thought kind of thing, and they're like, that would sound good, or you know, this storyline would be really good if I wrote it down, or
there's
what does it look like?
There's that's a lot I know about. There's definitely something that happens when you first wake up in the morning, that you're kind of in almost still in a dreamlike state, and there's a lot of freshness to your thought process. That wouldn't necessarily be how I work. I tend to like to do a bit of exercise in the morning, and let off some restless energy that I usually have when I wake up, and have like some tea, and then maybe sit down with whatever software. It doesn't even matter. Sometimes just GarageBand, because it's so quick and easy, and it's like a sketchbook, and just do literally like whatever, like sing a melody into the thing, or like make a rhythm with my mouth, or, like, that will later maybe become a drum pattern, or pick up the guitar, or just play around on the piano for like an hour until something comes through. So I'm very loose in my methodology. Cool,
something strikes you, and then you'll, you know, pursue that.
It's kind of, I stay very open. I don't have I mean, I'm working a bit more with guitar these days, so that's, and I'm also working on collaboration. So there's a lot of like guitar and singing at the moment, and less piano. But that's like a phase thing. So
I gotta hit you on the collaborations thing, because like I have two you know, sort of hobbyist DJ friends, and they were talking to me, and they were just like, when they heard me play Cortege for the Cortege, they were like, oh my god, like, you know, the vocals on that, and like do you get hit up with like producers or DJs looking for you to, like, you know, for example, like Dahi, you know, he uses like that kind of vocals to great effect. Do you get hit up a lot? Or?
Yeah. So I have a couple of collaborations coming up actually. Dahi actually just did a remix for me, so we'll be kind of releasing that later. And I'm doing a thing with DJ Cormac. He's got this big show on St. Patrick's Day in Vickers Street called Equivalent Exchange. So he's working with a couple of different people, the Irish Chamber Orchestra, a couple of different writers, myself included. And it's this kind of big collaborative project with like his beats and orchestral string parts and then vocalists on some of the stuff, and I'm one of the vocalists. And then I've got I'm doing more stuff with Bantam, Rory Lynch.
Okay.
He's a Corkonian producer. He was nominated for the Choice Prize last year for his album, his second album, Move, which I feature on. So yeah, there's a good bit of like production stuff, and production is one thing I haven't really gone in for. I didn't go in for heavily on my first EP because I didn't know what sound I wanted.
Right.
So I just recorded like a band. But I accept that that's kind of sometimes hard to access for people because we're in a time where production is like the center of music, and I opted out of really involving myself in it. So I sort of treated the record more like almost like the way jazz is recorded,
right.
Which is you just get the musicians to give their best performances in the room on the day, and you don't do a lot of super loads of pre-production. You do a bit, so you know what you want, kind of what you want them to do, but you let them sort of explode on the day, within the realm of what the parts are.
That's the kind of flavour of jazz, though, as well.
Yeah,
kind of like
it's a jazz mentality. Yeah.
Charlie Parker, is it? It was the one who's like, you know, practice, and then forget all that and play.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be that would be kind of his approach to everything. But certainly in improvisation, that's what you would do. So a lot of the parts on the EP are sort of improvised on the day, like they weren't
right.
pre-decided. The structure, the form, the chords, everything's written by me. And the general gist of this, what we're doing, but the guys are free to kind of explore their parts depending on the time and the day, like, and then there's exceptions to that of like, this is just how you play it. So I went for that approach, which means that my first EP, This Heart, is like definitely more amenable to an audience who'd listen to jazz or listen to kind of that type of music, or like world music where the players just shine. So it's sort of maybe not as readily accessible to like the everyday listener who's listening to like pop stuff that's crazy produced.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense where it's not really a trite question. It may come off as that though. But like when you're talking about your body of work and how like it can develop, and how I suppose you have one big body of work and then you're developing all the time, like where in terms of I suppose travel and touring, you were doing touring before Christmas, where do you aim to see yourself like going? Do you want to take a backseat when it comes to concerts? Do you want to continue to produce like album after album after album and tour, or do you have some other, you know, specialization, like where you're just like, I want to do almost like, I suppose, Sia or something, where she jumps on other people's albums, and like if that was amenable to you,
what would be like the ideal career, basically? Yeah, I mean, with Sia, I've followed her since the days of 07, when she was on like their one of their first albums, and some of the tracks were used in that film by Zach, the guy from Scrubs.
I know you're talking about. Are you talking about Garden State?
Garden State, yeah,
it's fantastic.
I think her stuff's on that, but
it's gonna annoy me now.
It's CN07, but yeah, like, and she did the whole touring thing. So I think it's important for me. I want to do what you would call the normal direction, which is becoming more real now in terms, which is, you know, release, tour, come back, right again, you know, release, tour, come back, right again. So there's like active phases to it, but definitely I am really into writing for others as well. So that will always be a part of, but that can kind of tick along in the background all the time. But I do want to I would love to tour as Loah, you know, and release like solid work that then, and tour it around and do like European festivals and gigs and the States and Asia, you know, and Africa, if that, there's certainly opportunities in all different parts of Africa for me to travel. So right now I would love to do all that. That would be the absolute dream, you know.
Right.
So it means like writing the tunes, you know, and really,
yeah, like getting it on paper and like doing the thing, you know, and just getting that concrete or
exactly, just having the material and the repertoire, and that I'm really, really happy to tour, that I can stand behind and go, yeah, I'm ready to rock up to Tokyo and play this, because I actually think it's worth listening to.
Yeah.
So, you know, it takes a while to actually get there. Like, I'm not like a braggadocio kind of person at all. I'm extremely like, I'd be quite neurotic and insecure about my work, and when I finally get to a point where I stand behind something, I really do stand behind it. But it doesn't happen very often that I feel like things are up to the quality.
The perfectionist.
And I think most artists are.
You know? I definitely agree. Yeah, well, most artists of note. I'm saying, like, you'd want to be, you know.
I suppose it's a protection mechanism against like any criticism that will come down the line. Like, at the very least, if you really believe it, no matter what stuff is thrown your way in terms of opinions, you know, even if they're upsetting or they're very, very positive, whichever they are, you kind of know how you feel about it, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's the Marcus Aurelius thing. Is like, you know, if you do really well, you know, he used to have these people follow him around and say, you're only a man after he won a battle. And it was because he didn't want his ego to get too big. You know, it's like people might say things are really good or things are really bad, like stuff that you've done, but like you have to keep it in the middle, to like leaning towards confidence. At least.
Yeah, exactly. Leaning towards enough confidence that you keep doing what you do and growing and expressing it and sharing it with people. You know, not just like sitting on stuff, because you're obsessed with your own fears. So you have to have forward momentum, but definitely check yourself all the time.
That's really important what you said there, like, because, you know, so many people are sitting on ideas and they're like, oh, it's such a good idea. They don't express it, like, even to their, like, brothers and sisters, family, you know, girlfriends. It's mad, you know. I want to get you on, just on, like, because you have, like, celebrity at the moment, I would say anyway, or at least minor. Like, maybe it's not in your head, you know, but have you, like, you've been recognised? Like, we were talking about, like, you know, people say good things, people say bad things. Have you been recognised? Have people come up to you? How does that, like, day to day?
I mean,
nothing?
Jesus, like, we live in such a tiny country. Like, people recognise you. Everybody gets recognised. Like, it's Ireland, you know. Like, we recognise each other, and like, everyone is kind of famous. And if we want to talk about that, because we've such a small community.
1 degree of separation.
So, like, I really do not feel like a celebrity.
Do you ever get like a sort of, you know, that where someone recognises you and they do the, like, their eyeballs kind of go like this?
I think people definitely seem to perceive that I'm, like, maybe more widely known than I actually am. I don't know. If you're really into the art scene, like, if you're really into the arts and music, you probably may have come across me. Right. But in the wider world, like, outside, and certainly outside of Ireland, I mean, I'm literally nobody. Like, I'm not, and I'm okay with that.
Humble.
For, you know, it's just the truth, you know. And I honestly don't really think that wide notoriety and recognition is necessarily a blessing. Like, it's a tricky one, because the industry we're in, you know,
it requires that.
That success often comes in if you're having originals project of your own. Success will often come with people with recognition, and I have friends who are very successful in that regard, and it's a real pain in the neck sometimes, and it's not something I would casually wish on anyone, myself included. So for now, I'm not worrying about any of that aspect of it, and just focusing on the work, and that will lead you to where, because I think in a way the ideal is to be somehow have a very like a career that you feel very good about, that's ticking along, and you're getting to do all the kinds of shows you want to do, but then not be recognised at all when you walk down the street. Like, that's kind of the dream. Like how do you
the Daft Punk model, like
exactly, like to find
to not
that line.
court fame, like, you know,
not court
like
fame.
we were talking about Sia. She doesn't court fame, like, you know, you could. The dream situation being that, like, you know, everyone wants love, everyone wants appreciation, wants, you know, regard for, like, the good work they've done, but they don't want, you know, to be, you know, going about their daily lives and be that flow to be interrupted by, you know. No,
and it's obviously, we all know, I mean, it's fickle, it's creepy it does creepy things to your mental health, and like Blind Boy's podcast, where he mentions, like this, you know, stuff to do with wearing a bag on his head is really interesting, because you know, I kind of felt jealous that I don't wear a bag on my head.
Yeah, and like, I mean, even people are doing it now. It's gotten to the stage, and like fame has gotten to that stage where you have, like, people are, you know, they're emulating, like, people like Daft Punk, and they're like, you know, for example, Daft Punk, then you have a Dead Mouse, so like a carbon copy, just hiding your identity in the hopes that, like, blocking the identity will create more interest, you know. It's like, it's almost like it's a combination
of the two. Yeah, it's definitely more common in the kind of EDM and all the things that come with that world, because it's really about, you know, the mixes and the production, the machine, as opposed to the person. Whereas singer-songwriters, the point of it is that you're singing, it's really from the heart. Not the production isn't, you know, but it's from your exact, you know, your body and whatever. And there's ideally, like, no wall between you and the audience. But there is a singer-songwriter called Her. It's Her with, like, H.E.R. She's an American, coming up in the kind of R&B world, and she has this, like, strict policy of, like, you just see her silhouette, and she's really she's like 21 or something, and I read about her speaking of it, like, she is of the opinion we're going into a post-fame world where, like, we're so overexposed that people are going to start, like, doing the exact opposite, like the Sia thing, you know, just being like, right, I'm out of the game. If you want to get involved, you're just getting audio. Like, don't even bother Googling me, because you're not going to find anything. I think it's
which is great. It's fantastic, because it's, like, solely on the art of it. And,
yeah,
like,
exactly. And I, you know, that it would be great if that was all anyone was ever judged on, just the art, you know. But it's a complicated industry, and other things come with it. So. Yeah,
I mean, image is a big thing, you know, in this day and age. Very instant world.
Yes.
On that note, we'll finish. Loah, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.